Face the ultimatum.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome to my Vortex guide. This guide is going to go over pretty much everything you need to know about the build. We are a block Vortex cold snap self cast build. We will be using a hybrid take as we level, and when we get to a certain point, we'll be able to switch into chaos inoculation. You should expect to have upwards of 7,000 to probably around 10,000 energy shield with this build, depending on how much currency you want to dump, whether or not you're trade league, whether or not you're in hardcore, solo self-found, and or softcore solo self. This build is hardcore viable and softcore viable with some tweaks, but I will say that it is far more viable as a trickster setup as far as hardcore is concerned. I want you to keep that in mind. Occultist is really good for damage, and we are able to squeeze out quite a bit out of this build with pretty minimal investment, I'd say. So if you we are using Path to Building Community Fork. Links will be in the description, as well as the POB to this build. And if you guys enjoy the content, if you guys like the build, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Here, I would like to go over some of the core skills that we're using. We're using a 6-link Vortex. We're using a Frost Bomb setup for our cold exposure. Even though it's been nerfed, it's still absolutely worth using. We also are running Cold Snap with Val Cold Snap and Val Discipline as some of our main cooldowns. Very important, Val Discipline, especially in hardcore. I cannot stress that enough. We are running Still Skin as well, very low cast when damage taken setup. You can tweak this if you see fit, as well as Shield Charge and Flame Dash. Now, I'd like to talk about Ascendancy. We have chosen to go with Occultist, and we will be going here. Let me switch my tree to our level 95 tree. I'll set this back up for the POB whenever we're done with the video. We are going to be running Vile Bastion first. That will be the very first Ascendancy that you take. And then for your second Ascendancy, you'll pick a Void Beacon, because we will be pretty much up in everyone's faces pretty much all the time for our 20% negative 20% cold resistance. And then we will be picking up Frigid Weight to make sure that we can't be frozen or chilled. We get more damage. We freeze and chill enemies every 4 seconds. And yeah, this node in particular is extremely good for hardcore. And then our very last one is Forbidden Power. If you want, you can run a double curse setup if you are kind of a seasoned player and you know how to manipulate the build. You can certainly pick up some extra damage there, and or Profane Bloom if you like some extra clear speed. I prefer this setup. I really like having the Frenzy and the power charges from Cold Snap, and it just works really well. We get extra damage, extra AoE. It's perfect. I do have the POB broken up into individual acts for brand new players, and this is pretty much the path that you're gonna take all the way through the acts. And you can see we move into the Trickster side, we come into the Templar side. We are running max block as well as glancing blows, and I'll explain my reasoning behind that. And you'll see, if you see from the gameplay video, we really didn't have any issue killing any of the bosses. We didn't have any issues with tier 16 Delirious maps, and we are able to accomplish that for pretty simple reason as far as what shield we're using. Now, I do have a level 100 no cluster tree. And as you can see, our damage is fairly good, 707,000. It's not bad at all. And then we switched to CI. When I leveled, I switched to CI no clusters. And then we ended up adding in a Thread of Hope. We'll go over here. And then we also have a CI cluster setup that is running EE with a trigger spell wand. I believe we use Orb of Storms. You can use Stormbrand if you prefer. I just prefer Orb of Storms. I think it works a little bit better. We are running Elemental Overload. And let's just stick to this tree for now. Mana can be a little bit of an issue if you're not careful. So we do pick up Mind Drinker, but we do eventually drop it for Soul Thief later. We are running EE as well in our no cluster setup, and we do level as hybrid. Very important, but we do enjoy a pretty vast amount of it. So these are just kind of the rough layout that you're going to want to go towards. We are running Wicked Ward as well, and no Threat of Hope in our level 100. So that gives you just a small breakdown. Like I said, each act is individually in there. Eventually, you'll want to get up to this. With EE activated, we're looking at about 1.3 million dot DPS with quite a bit of defenses, to be honest. Quite a bit. The build will require quite a bit of strength. This is why I have practical application. And if you want, you can pick up some on your gear, on your amulet specifically. We also are going to require a fair amount of dex. You will require more strength than dex. So I also have allocated a might node just because it helps a ton. And be mindful that the way that this is set up right here, this is my setup currently in game. I could not find a jewel with a reduced amount of passives. So obviously this is not the most efficient way to do it. We could definitely free up some extra points here. And so for those that want to use cluster jewels, you know that you can probably squeeze out an extra probably 2 or 3 passive points that could be put elsewhere for defense or offense, whichever one you prefer. Now let's talk cluster jewels. So originally I had a dual cluster jewel setup, but I found it to be not very efficient as far as defenses go. Because if you do run one over here, which it is right here, which you certainly can, but you will lose your glancing blows, and you would have to take that, try to figure out how to get that into your setup. You would lose the block nodes, and I just don't like it. So we ended up keeping elusive, keeping glancing blows, and running with just a single side cluster setup. So we're running Deep Chill, Prismatic Heart, Widespread Destruction. I really like the area of effect on Vortex. It's huge for clear. We're running another Deep Chill and Brush with Death, and these two are pretty much mirrored. So another Deep Chill, another Brush with Death. And to kind of just round out our max block setup, we are running Spell Block with Spell Leech and Regen, as well as another Brush with Death. I really like Brush with Death. It helps a ton with what we're trying to achieve with this build, being max block and regening and recovering our energy shield as we block. That's going to be pretty paramount for this build. And it's part of the reason why we are surviving as well as we are. Now, I would also like to talk about the layout of our skills, our gameplay strategy, and what we tend to do when we are in maps. I run Vortex as a left click, lazy Vortex. It's really the only way to fly. I run Shield Charge on my right click. This obviously should not be there. We run Val Discipline on our R. Our E is Tempest Shield. Our W is Frost Bomb, and our Q is our Cold Snap. You hit Control, we have Flame Dash on our spacebar, and then we have our Malevolence and our Discipline auras. So why don't we pop in a little T16 map here? Nothing too crazy. We'll just kind of run a little something. I'm not even gonna like do anything to juice it. I'm just gonna throw it in. We have done up to 100% Delirious, though I will say some of the bosses do take a little while to kill. We are a dot build, so it's we don't do a ton of burst damage. But yeah, you just right click, get that fortify going. Pop down your cold snaps, get your frenzy charges, very important. And as you can see, we have no problem killing absolutely everything. And if you're worried about the build being kind of slow, there are faster builds 100%, but this one is not as, it's not as slow as you might think. Profane Bloom will absolutely help with your overall clear. But I prefer to have the extra AoE. You'll want to keep flame dashing to keep your buff up from Arcane Surge. And yeah, you just kind of go through it. I think this is probably a good time for us to talk about what mods we can run and what mods we cannot run as far as maps go. Unfortunately, with this being an elemental build, we don't have immune to reflect on this build, so you will have to be very, very much aware of that. So, mods we can't run. Players cannot regen life, energy, shield, or mana. Cannot run. We just can't run it. Another mod we can't run. For reduced block. Our defensive capabilities are really, really, really reliant on block. So if we can't block, or if that chance is reduced, our survivability is almost shot, to be quite frank. Another one you can't run. Monsters reflect elemental damage. Those are the three main mods. Everything else, you should be good to go. 60% reduction in recovery of life, mana, and energy shield is still very much doable. I've done them in tier 16. I don't know if I would recommend doing it in a delirium map, but you know, mileage may vary. But reduced block, elemental reflect, cannot regenerate ES, mana, or life. Stay away from those three. You'll have really, really, really smooth time mapping. Okay, let's talk about our bandits. Our bandits are going to be kill all, and we are running Soul of Lunaris. And you would obviously want to like fill this out, capture the Ancient Architect, Shock and Horror, as well as Shadow Alchemist. And I tend to switch between Girthcool and Ralikesh, depending on which one gives you like more issue. We need to be very careful with bleeds. Obviously, everyone knows this, and this is pretty much how I roll. For the most part, I keep it on this, but every now and then I'll switch it to Ralikesh, depending on what the map calls for. Okay, let's go over our support skills. Now we have the POB set up for full leveling, and then we have all of our pure end game set up. In our first weapon, we are going to be running Frost Bomb and Tempest Shield. Tempest Shield, it gives us an extra bit of attack block and spell block, as well as gives us an easier time to proc our EE, our Elemental Equilibrium. Because we are max block with Glancing Blows, we are going to be blocking a ton. Tempest does chain one time, and you can even, I imagine you can slap chain on this if you would prefer, and have it do some extra chaining and make your EE proc even easier. You may not even need a trigger wand for that, though I do recommend running one, in my opinion. We are running Shield Charge with Fortify and faster attacks. We run faster attacks so we can shield charge faster. The higher your shield charge, the better it's going to feel, right? And the same goes for faster attack. Fortify, because we are up in people's faces, we are up in the mix, and so the Fortify is a pretty massive part of our defensive capability. We're running Swift Affliction with Hypothermia, Controlled Destruction, Efficacy, and Elemental Focus. I am not relying on Vortex to chill and freeze. We have our Ascendancy for that. So I'm more than fine having that not being able to afflict ailments. Besides that, Vortex has two parts. It has an on-hit, and then it has a DOT. The on-hit does not have ailments. The DOT does. So be aware of that. We're also running Cold Snap with efficacy, Bone Chill, and Hypothermia. If I need something really chilled down hard, I use Cold Snap. And another reason we use Cold Snap is for our Frenzy charges. And we get up to 3 of them max. And we get 4 power charges per our Ascendancy. And so both of those together really make the build feel super smooth. We're running Malevolence for more damage over time and increased skill effect duration. We're running Discipline to help out our hybrid and CI setups. We're running Val Cold Snap and Val Discipline, or kind of our cooldowns. You know, I use Val Cold Snap and Discipline are immensely effective in ultimatums. This build is perfect for ultimatums. High block, high recovery, lots of AoE, run around in a circle and just win. That's all you do. In our boots, we are running a cast when damage taken steel skin. You can raise and lower this setup depending on your preference. I prefer to keep it kind of low so we get a lot of use out of it. We are running Flame Dash with Arcane Surge. We keep Arcane Surge at level 8. Flame Dash as high as you can get it. This way we can proc our Arcane Surge off of 1 cast. As you can see, our Over Storms is also in our wand, and our Frostbite is on our ring. And that pretty much concludes all of our support setups. Now let's talk about gear. We do have a starter gear setup, which will be in the POB. we'll have a full kind of base setup for your leveling purposes. And then we'll have pretty much something that you can achieve. Some of these things you can achieve. Most of these things really you can achieve just as from a league starter itself. Baited breaths, especially on SSF, are not that hard to find. I found like 5 of them. Obviously, mileage is going to vary. Same with the Rhyme Gaze. And these two are absolutely interchangeable. A really nice crystal belt would be just as good, if not better in some cases, than a baited breath. So keep that in mind as well. A 5-link and or 6-link could be just as good in a good kind of side grade to Rhyme Gaze. A 6-link would be more ideal overall because you are losing 30% cold damage over time. This helmet is amazing for damage. And if you're looking for a helmet chant, Vortex, just flat increased damage, it's huge. And it is the one that I would go with. We just have pure Ent gear, pure ES gear, ES with life resistance. And that's about it. That's really all you're looking for. Max life, ES, and resistances for your hybrid build. We are running an Onyx amulet. I prefer Onyx. You could go with a Dex Strength amulet because those are the 2 stats that we're going to be lacking in. But I like Onyx aim personally. Our rings are Opale. You could go with a Moonstone instead, or a Coral, or if you're lacking a bit of resistance at the moment, obviously 2 stone. But you will want to grab Frostbite on a ring as soon as possible. It helps a ton with damage, and you will be clearing like a monster. I guarantee it. Super, super good. Here is our cluster setup. And let's talk about our jewels for a second, because this is something that we need to go over. We're in the gear section. Our Thread of Hope has to be a large. And it is not coincidentally the most expensive one. I got pretty lucky with this one. I had it for about 90C when I did this in Trade League. And we got one with -11 elemental and a large radius, so we were able to pick up Breath of Rhyme, Heart of Vice, Utmost Intellect is amazing, especially for energy shield. Snow Forged, Practical Application, big time, especially for the 25 strength and dex, which is considerably better than this node because you only get 1 stat, right? So this is not mandatory, but it does help a lot. it does help a lot. It might be kind of difficult to find this in solo self-found, but I don't think it breaks the build for solo self-found. The build can be playable without it. Now, let's talk about our flasks. I was lucky enough to get a Rumi's concoction off of an ultimatum. So a Rumi's would be ideal, but it's not something that you have to have. We want to get as high as block as possible, as early as possible, to help with our defense. But to help with other things, we do use a Quartz Flask. This is my Bleed Flask. The end game is running a Cinder Swallow for the extra ES regen. Though, I will say it is not 100% needed right now. Your recovery is going to be insane. I like to have this just as an extra boon to it. But if you would prefer to run a Rumi's and or perhaps a granite, a different granite of sorts, I found granites to be very useful, especially because we're getting hit so much. So if you can't get a Rumi's, just run a normal granite of your liking. We're also running a basalt, a sulfur, and a generic quicksilver. This is our general leveling setup. We level with Wintertide, with a mix of Wintertide and Freezing Pulse. And if you come over to the notes section, I have every act broken down up until until like Act 4, right? And then you don't really need any other gems. So as you can see here, we run Winterbrand, Efficacy, and Control Destruction. We're running Cold Snap, Cold Destruction, Ellie Focus in Act 2, Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, and then we start running Tempest Shield with Frost Bomb and Orb of Storms just to get it leveled. I break down where you can find the new gems in each act. Here's our Act 1 stuff. You need to be looking for a blue-green socket and a +1 to all cold spells and or spell power wand, which the vendor recipe is listed right below. And I have, like I said, I have this for every single act up to Act 4. We have little notes to explain to you, like if you have any questions. These were my most common questions when I was doing the build, when I was building it. So I thought it might be useful. We want to prioritize gems and refer to the skills tab for further information, which is right here. We want to move to 4 links as soon as possible. This is very important for Act 6, keeping our resists as high as possible. I prefer running Flame Dash on my spacebar. Some don't. Some think it's kind of weird and wonky. I think it worked perfectly for this build. This build is extremely mobile. And I talk about some of my Keybinds setups right here. And that's pretty much it. This is extremely viable as a league start build. It requires almost no uniques, and those uniques that it does require are fairly easy to find, minus the thread of hope. In a solo self-found situation, it might be kind of difficult to get a thread of hope. But if you do find one, you can always change the radius with a divine orb and make that as easy. And it, if you want, you can sell a 6-link, like a corrupted 6-link from a Val area for a divine orb at the vendor, which makes things a lot easier. So that is the build in its entirety. I don't think we really missed anything else. I think we went over just about everything. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to put a comment down. And if you liked it and you used it and you liked it, or you just want to say hello or anything at all, comment. And if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing more builds here pretty soon. I'm working on right now. It's a Caustic Arrow Raider, and we're leveling it in hardcore right now. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for hanging out with me, and yeah, take care of yourselves. All right.